The stage, Sandra Rattley, Tammi Lawson, and Charlotte Mangin.
So much, everyone, for being here, for coming today. It is such an honor to be here at the Schomburg. As that short film in the beginning showed us, this is a place of so much history, the centering of research, and so much of importance to us in terms of the history of this country, our presence here. And also knowing that Augusta Savage, some of the first courses she taught to young people were actually at the 135th Street Public Library. So she herself had a connection to the Schomburg. So wow, and as you could see in the film, most of the visual images we had that we featured came from the Schomburg's collection. So, and we're very grateful to Tammi, who's obviously a movie star, who we feature prominently in the movie. So, Charlotte, congratulations.
Congratulations.
For making such a beautiful film. So why did we decide to do a documentary about Augusta Savage?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So nice to be here. So Sandy and I met over a decade ago through a Harlem-based production company named Futuro Media. We worked on a project called America by the Numbers for PBS, and decided we were inseparable as production partners and have been working together ever since. And most recently founded this production company, Audacious Women, following on the heels of our previous project, Unladylike 2020, which came out for the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in 2020. We had studied a lot of activists in civil rights and politics, but no artist activists. And when we learned about Augusta Savage, we thought this is the next audacious woman that we want to feature. Not to mention that there's so much relevance today, as you heard Denise Morel from the Metropolitan Museum in the film mention, that white male artists continue to dominate museum and gallery collections today. And recent research shows that less than 1%, I think it's 0.5%, of museum acquisitions in America are by Black women artists. So the work that Augusta started over 100 years ago continues to this day.
So one of the things we have found in really trying to tell the stories of Black women, of BIPOC women in particular, and their contribution to this country, to our culture, to our history, is that oftentimes it's very difficult to tell those stories because there's not a lot in the archive to really show what happened. And we were really challenged in telling the story of Augusta Savage because she moved to New York at the age of 29 in 1921, but no visual imagery existed of her before that time. No baby pictures, no family pictures, no high school yearbooks, nothing. And so, as you could see in the film, we actually used animation to try to recreate her birth. And when she was 5 years old, it was said that she started playing with red clay that she found very close to her home, and actually got in trouble with her parents for playing in red clay and tracking it in the house. And her father, who was a Methodist minister, actually felt as if the images she was making were graven images. And she, in her own words, says that her parents almost beat the art out of her, but thankfully they didn't succeed. So we're very proud of the fact that despite the fact that there was not a lot of imagery, that we were still able to tell her story. And obviously, since so much of her art has been lost or destroyed, also we had to do a lot of research to find any images to really represent those pieces. For Lift Every Voice and Sing, for example, our initial idea was to try to really create a 3D experience for the audience so that you would be able to see that piece of work in a circular way from all vantage points, but we could only find profiles of the sculpture. And so we had a 3D artist basically take that outline and duplicate it and then kind of put them together. So it did really take a little bit of creative magic to be able to tell the story of a woman who was so accomplished, but that I think, as Novella said, obviously there are people who've always studied her and who know about her. Tammi, of course, being a specialist and knowing a lot about Augusta Savage, but considering all that she accomplished, we felt it was really important to make sure more people know about her. So before we get to Tammi, so Charlotte, what's some of the information about Augusta Savage that we wanted to make a long film about Augusta Savage because her life is so full, but we were commissioned to make a film that was 22 minutes, and thus this is what we're sharing with you today. But what were some of the things we wanted to put in the movie that we were not able to squeeze in?
Yes, so many things. She does deserve a feature-length story. So just to rattle a few of them off, she had a very interesting connection to Marcus Garvey's UNIA, United Negro Improvement Association, thank you, and was a black nationalist, and her third of 3 husbands was actually a UNIA leader. She had a connection to a lot of, sorry, I'm blanking, I apologize. She was potentially being followed by the FBI, and there's a few papers in the documents upstairs here at the Schomburg. Most of them are completely blacked out of her FBI files as a result, perhaps, of her black nationalist connections. She was also, unfortunately, being stalked by a white eugenicist and author named Joe Gould, who became obsessed with her, tried to get her to marry him, was harassing her, potentially may have physically attacked her, but she didn't feel she could go to the police to seek any sort of redress, and may have been one of the reasons that she moved upstate in the last 20 years of her life to get away from him. He had been in and out of mental institutions, and she wanted to get away from him. She was extremely resourceful. When she couldn't find materials to make her sculptures, she would use things like soap. There's an amazing story that Sandy tells, if you want to tell it, of her creating
Augusta
soap
Savage was
sculptures.
taking a train from New York to Chicago, and there was a woman on the train that had a baby, and Augusta Savage thought the baby was so cute that she reached in her purse and took a bar of soap and carved the face of the baby. And that later on, the mother realized that that bar of soap probably had some value, and she took it to Camille Billups, who actually then had it bronzed. So I've seen the bronze of the bar of soap. So it's not the original bar of soap, but it's a bronze that was made from the bar of soap. And it's just amazing how much emotion and detail that she was able to get in a bar of soap that she carved of a baby on a train. Another issue about her resourcefulness is when she was when she was doing the sculpture Lift Every Voice and Sing, she had cast a bunch of people to come to be her, to be the artist, to basically be what would be recreated in the sculpture. And some of the people didn't show up, so she went out in the streets of Harlem and just asked some people to come on in to basically pose. And so the person that is in the front, the black man who's in the front, who's holding the music score, is actually her accountant. His name is George. That she was like, "Come on, you're gonna have to pose for
Tammi
this."
has a letter in her
Tammi has a
artist
letter
file.
from George describing this occasion when Augusta Savage basically recruited him. So Tammi, Jacob Lawrence, obviously a very famous artist who, part of the story that we weren't able to tell about him was actually when he was 20 years old, Augusta Savage took him down to the Federal Arts Project and said, you need to get paid. And they said he's not old enough. And so on his 21st birthday, he said he'd forgotten about the conversation. Augusta Savage knocked on his door and took him back down to the Federal Arts Commission so that he could actually start getting paid as an artist. So why did Jacob Lawrence call her a leading light of the Harlem Renaissance?
She was such a fundamental part of the community and such a giving heart. And she, like he said, he would not have been an artist if it wasn't for Augusta Savage actually taking him down and getting him on the WPA so that he could actually be paid. But before that, he was her student. And Augusta started, her first school was here at the Schomburg Center, and she really had a love for children. And she was really a beautiful communicator, and she really felt that what she learned in Europe, that she needed to pass that on, that she wanted to instill in children a beauty and a love for art and for themselves as people. So she was very compassionate, and she really helped the children. So she was a light, and she was doing so much in the community. Of course, it was during the Harlem Renaissance period, so everyone was here, and she really took the time to nurture the kids that she taught. And then once she taught them, as she moved up, she took them with her. So they were her students. And then when the WPA came along, she was able to hire them on as teachers. And then she formed the Harlem Artists Guild to fight for Black artists to be put on the WPA projects over at Harlem Hospital. So Charles Alston, who was her assistant director of the Harlem Community Arts Center, he became the project director for the Harlem Hospital Community Arts Center. Selma Burke got a job doing drawing. Norman Lewis, who also was the treasurer of the Harlem Artists Guild, he became a painting instructor during the WPA. So she was a very giving person. She was a light. She was a waymaker.
So talking about the Harlem Renaissance, that's roughly between 1918 and 1937. And during that time period, it's estimated that about 119,000, about 120,000 white residents left Harlem, while about 90,000 African Americans came to Harlem from the rural South to get away from Jim Crow and racial terror, and also people came from the Caribbean. And so that was part of the Great Migration. The NAACP was founded, the Urban League was founded. The Crisis magazine was an important source of information, as was Opportunity, and then the United Negro Improvement Organization had the Negro World. So these three publications were very important in terms of spreading information. But the cell phone wasn't invented until 1973, so we know folks weren't DMing and texting each other. So how did people get in contact? How did people connect? We know that there was a great amount of interchange between artists, painters, writers, photographers, and political activists. W.E.B. Du Bois, and as we saw in the film, many of them gathered at Augusta Savage's house and many other places. So how, I mean, like I said, they weren't calling each other. How did the hookups happen?
Well, right here at the Schomburg Center.
Okay.
For one, the 135th Street branch has always been a cultural hub for the community. Dr. Elaine Locke had his adult education programs here. W.E.B. Du Bois started the Caragua Players, so the American Negro Theaters right here. There was productions, there were poetry readings, there were art shows, there were everything that you could think of was happening here at the 135th Street Branch Library. And of course, you know, again, W.E.B. Du Bois, Elaine Locke, Langston Hughes, who's still here with us, interned in the Langston Hughes lobby. We had great librarians here who got more information. Of course, Mr. Schomburg, he also was a co-founder of the Harlem Artists Guild, and he also, although he's mostly known as a bibliophile, Mr. Schomburg was a patron of arts, and he was he had a lot of artwork in his original collection, so he also promoted an artist and also fostered a lot of that happening here at the Schomburg Center.
But let's talk about this concept of salons, that a lot of times folks would get together and they would socialize, but also have debates and conversations, et cetera. So let's talk about how salons got started in Harlem. We know that actually there was a big link between the negritude movement in Paris as well as the Harlem Renaissance, and exchange back and forth. And some of the first salons that were actually held among black people, there was a negritude salon that was held in Paris. There was a lot of interchange between Langston Hughes and other folks who were in Paris, including Augusta Savage, who kind of brought that idea back. And Augusta Savage, even though her apartment was really small, she was really known to give some house parties, some card parties, et cetera. So let's describe what the social life in that exchange could have been like.
It was incredible, and it's documented in the Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Division. We have the 409 Edgecombe Avenue Tenants Association. Of course, 409 Edgecombe was the apartment building where the talented 10th all lived. So W.E.B. Du Bois was there. Regina Andrews, who was the librarian here, and her husband, I forget his name, but they lived in the penthouse. Thurgood Marshall lived there. Augusta Savage lived there. There were so many people that lived there, so it was just that type of community. Like, people got together to discuss ways in which black people could advance and create.
And Charlotte, you wanted to add anything?
Well, I think it's specifically about salons, one of the most famous, and we didn't actually find evidence of whether Augusta was at any of those parties, but I imagine she would have been because many of her friends are on the guest list. But Madam C.J. Walker's daughter, Alelia Walker, had a salon named Dark Tower. It was named that after a poem by County Cullen. It was right near here on West 136th Street, a 34-room mansion, and she would have these incredible parties. She was an arts patron and would bring together all these intellectuals and artists to debate ideas, share work, read poetry. In addition to which, even before the Great Depression in the 20s, a lot of the ways that people in Harlem paid their rent was by having rent parties where they would charge admissions. It was a potluck dinner. There was always a musician playing live music, and people would come to eat, drink bootleg liquor. It was during Prohibition, of course, and dance the night away. And the admissions fee is what helped you pay the rent that month. So I don't know if Augusta was having rent parties too, but.
We know she was having card parties and entertaining quite a bit. Tammi, in the film, Dr. Denise Murrell, who is a curator at the Metropolitan Museum, she curated the exhibit that's there currently, the Harlem Renaissance and Transatlantic Modernism. So when she says that Augusta Savage's work is not in a lot of the major museums, and not even the museums at HBCUs, maybe a few of them, like I know Howard University and Fisk. But so where is her art? Or is it in private collections?
Well, of course, we have the largest collection of work by Augusta Savage, but she is in a few museums. The Cleveland Museum of Art has work. The Boston Museum of Art has one work. The Studio Museum in Harlem, Howard.
DuSable has some.
DuSable.
In Chicago.
Yeah, there's a few. But of course, she's also probably still in a lot of private collections. And hopefully those people will reach out to us.
Right. And Charlotte, we actually still found some pieces of hers that are being auctioned, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's at least maybe 20 or so pieces that are up for auction. I think they may be replicas of the original, but yes.
Some of her mocks. So before we open it up to the audience, there are mics in the back. We'd like to hear your feedback as well as your questions or comments. We do want to mention that there is educational material, resources that's available now. That's for students in elementary schools and middle schools and high schools to learn about Augusta Savage. So Audacious Women Productions, that's us, right?
Yes.
We commission the creation of a standards-aligned educational resources for grades 6 through 12 that's free and can be found on PBS Learning Media website. So Charlotte, do you want to mention a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yes. So pbslearningmedia.org, it's a free website available to anybody, but used by 1.6 million educators around the country. And we created interactive resources for middle and high school students. There are 3 different lesson plans. One is about Lift Every Voice and Sing, both Augusta's work, but also what is now known as the Black National Anthem. And its history. There's one about the Harlem Renaissance and the many other artists that she interacted with or whose careers she helped launch. And one about Black representation, the representation of the Black body in the artwork of the 20s and 30s, and really putting into context how radical it was for her to represent the Black body in a way that was not racist and stereotypical.
And also, it's very exciting that New York Public Library has created a box set for teachers that includes 3D printed replicas of 3 of Augusta Savage's sculptures.
Yeah, yes.
Tell us about that, Tammi.
The Art and Artifacts Division, the digital section of the New York Public Library, and our own digital curator here. We work together with the Center for Educators in Schools downtown as part of the New York Public Library. And we collaborated with My Library NYC. You could go to that, mylibrarynyc.org. And My Library NYC works with is part of the New York Public Library, works with the DOC, and they create box sets to help teachers teach students. So they created an Augusta Savage box set that comes with
your book.
Right, a book that I wrote an afterword for Augusta Savage. It's a young adult book, Augusta Savage, The Shape of a Sculptor's Life. And then it also has a curriculum. It has some images from our collection, laminated images of Augusta Savage that you could also see in our Photographs and Prints division. And then what made it really special is that we were able to recreate 3 replicas of Augusta Savage's work with 3D printing. So the box set includes Leonora, Gammon, and the Pugilist, and they're little replicas. You'll see them in the open archive after if you stay for that. And the kids will read the book, they'll learn about Augusta Savage, and they'll be able to handle the work. So we're very pleased with that, and that's the first time the library has done that.
It's really great.
Yeah, so all you have to do with that, just want to let you know if there's any educators here or homeschoolers, all you have to do, have your library card, go to mylibrariesnyc.org, type in Augusta Savage, and the library delivers the red box with the books for your class and the 3D replicas, and you get to keep them for like 3 months. You read the books, you do whatever you're going to do with it, and then you bring it back. And we created, I think, 10 box sets. So that's for the whole New York, the whole New York metropolitan area and homeschoolers.
And there are 10 books, 10 copies of the book in each box set. Right?
Yeah.
So thank you to the Schomburg for doing that, for creating those 3D prints. So, making art come alive and being able to actually touch it, I think, will make a lot of difference in the lives
Definitely,
of children.
yeah. And I'm so pleased that we were able to do that, because that extends Augusta Savage's legacy. It gets her into the schools. The students will definitely remember her name and identify her by the works.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we welcome anybody who has any thoughts, questions, reflections, feedback on the film, to please, we'd love to hear from you. And please just tell us your first name.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle. I'm curious, the movie talked about her daughter that she had left behind, and I was just curious, did she have any other children? And then I have one more question after that.
Yeah, her daughter, she left Irene with her family in Florida, then they moved up here. So she was close with her daughter. Her daughter lived in Brooklyn. She never had children, but I was friends with her stepdaughter and now her step-granddaughter. So throughout the years, we maintained a relationship.
And she actually had a second baby with her third husband, and unfortunately it was a stillbirth or died in infancy. Yeah, very young.
But the family, most of the collection you have is from
Lorraine.
For Lorraine. Right.
Yeah. Lorraine Lucas was the step-granddaughter via Irene, donated it to the library, yeah.
Thank you. And then the other question I had is, the movie also talked about her being a bit heartbroken at when the gallery had to close, as well as the educational project that she had. And there was, maybe not verbatim, something about the community wasn't ready for her. And I'm thinking that she was talking about the African American community, and I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about that.
Well, I'll just speculate a little bit. I mean, I think that.
I can't hear you, Sandy. I think did your mic drop? I can't hear you.
I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. So Augusta Savage, as was described in the film, for the World's Fair, she did have maquettes or kind of souvenir versions of Lift Every Voice and Sing made. And so she made a lot of them and expected to sell them in the Black community, and was disappointed that people weren't interested in buying them. But I think in a larger sense, she was talking about the larger art community and not just the Black community. Augusta Savage, as was described, was a person who always made lemonade out of lemons. Whenever she got to an obstacle, she figured out a way to negotiate and to strategize to get to her objective. But after having the work in 1939 in the World's Fair, it being seen by 5 million people, the most photographed, the most visited, and it was considered such a pinnacle in her career, I think that she expected, as a result of that, for big things to continue to happen. But the juxtaposition of the Great Depression and kind of the downturn in general related to art sales, I mean, she was impacted by that, in addition to the fact that she was a realistic artist, and shortly thereafter, around 1940 or so, there was more attention being given to abstract art. And so she felt as if her approach maybe was not appreciated as much. So So what we were trying to find out, actually, in going to Socrates and going on this search to find out where is her work, kind of what happened, is that it was actually, I think, as Jeffreen says in the film, it was really a relief to know that when she got to Socrates, she was still very, very active. Again, as we mentioned, there was so much we could have put in the film. She raised something like 200 birds, and she was just such a.
She worked in a cancer research lab.
She worked in a cancer research lab because she grew up in Florida and she was always close to animals. She was actually doing taking blood samples and doing research on mice because other people were afraid and she wasn't. So she continued, and she also continued to write children's books. She continued to teach children in Socrates. She continued to work her craft. She continued to do sculptures. And so I guess there was some disappointment, but she did continue living a very full and rich and very, very vigorous life.
Yeah, I think she felt also that the community, I think she was talking about people at large, because Augusta was way before her time. She was in the stratosphere in terms of being a Black woman artist. She was, the first Black woman artist accepted into the National Sculpture Society, and also her school was a model. Her WPA school was run so well that Eleanor Roosevelt came to Harlem, and then all the WPA-funded schools throughout the country were modeled after her school. And there's also an image in the book, as well as an image in the Photographs and Prints division of Augusta Savage with Eleanor Roosevelt here. But she was disappointed, and I think personally that a lot of people were just jealous of her. So it's a combination of racism and sexism that worked against her. In '37, she was the director of the Harlem Community Arts Center. She got the commission to do Lift Every Voice and Sing, so she left that to do her sculpture for the year. When that was over, she came back, but she didn't get her job back. Her seminal work got destroyed. She tried to save it. She tried to have Fisk University was interested. Insurance company in Florida was interested in it, but the shipping costs, the scheduling of a barge to have it go to Florida, even everything was off. So things just didn't work out. So that's what I think. And then people also were against her. So let me just tell you, that talented 10th did not necessarily embrace Augusta Savage. She was not Harvard educated. She was not a quadroon, octoroon, or mulatto. She was from Florida. She was the 7th of 14 children, and she came here grown. The other people were younger. She came to Harlem. She looked good, but she came to Harlem. She was already an adult. So I feel like a lot of people, they couldn't put it over on her. She lived a life. She was married twice already, but she came to pursue her career. So she was a womanist. So there's a lot of things she was disappointed in, but she was way before her time.
And I just want to add also, it was interesting reading an article that was written about her while she was in Paris, and she was described as the first Black nationalist artist. The fact that she centered Black life and Black people in her work, and she did that consistently. And you can imagine in 1920, 1930, 1940, that was a very new concept in terms of really being unapologetically Black. So there were many factors where, I even describe her as, kind of one of the first Black Lives Matter activists before anybody even used those terms.
Mm-hmm. Her and Mr. Schomburg.
Yeah.
Because I just want to add this too, although Mr. Schomburg is definitely celebrated. Even back in him and Augusta, they were on the outside. They were on the outside. You know, W.E.B. Du Bois, Elaine Locke, they had their Harvard education, and then it was the rest of them. And even one of my researchers was at the Spin Gone collection at Howard University, and she said, "Oh, Tammi, I discovered these letters, and we have them in the collection now." Elaine Locke and other people were actively sabotaging her. There's letters that my researcher gave me where she would appear at events and they would pay hecklers in the audience. Yeah, so it wasn't, you know, it was her against the world, you know, and
Well,
that
she was
had
lifting everybody else
right,
up, yeah.
and she had a lot of fortitude, and you know, she couldn't be stopped, but there was a lot against her, a lot, and like Charlotte said, she deserves a movie like Ray, if you knew what went on, if you could imagine what went on, and she was still able to create and to give back and to uplift despite all that. Incredible artist. That's the only person we should be talking about in the 20th century is Augusta Savage.
Well, we're doing our part,
Yeah, that's
Tammi.
right.
We're doing our part.
That's right. Give it up for Augusta Savage.
Yes.
Hi, thank you all so much. I'm Amelia, and I'm currently a scholar in residence here. It's great to hear about the things that are happening, especially being made available to educators. I had a comment and a question, so I wanted to say the moment in the film that was, I mean, the whole thing was powerful, but it was also very powerful, Tammi, when you said that she was an artist. You can tell when an artist loves us, and that you can sort of feel that from the work, and I think it was very palpable. And I guess the question I had is more about Augusta Savage, the poet, which kind of came in briefly at the end, and I was just curious to know more, even the works that were being shown on the screen, are they published? Are they in the collections here? Like, where is her poetry?
Right. In the Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Division, in her papers, there are 3 unpublished books, and I think some of her poetry. And with the databases, you will see her, you know, there's some newspapers will say, talk about her as a poet, or that Augusta Savage read her poetry or something like that.
A lot of the information we got in terms of her biography is part of a 5-page interview the Federal Arts Commission did with her. And you could tell in that, because it is verbatim, you know, what a good, how sassy she was, what a good writer she was, just in how she expressed herself.
Yeah.
So we out of town, Novella?
If we have no other questions.
Oh, one person.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, this girl.
Yes.
Please use the mic at the back of the room. Thank you.
Proud to be me.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Madeline. I wanted to ask, I wanted to touch a little bit on the concept of Ms. Savage and Mr. Schomburg being 2 of the people that kind of lay the framework for understanding that investing in art and collecting art as the voice of like a movement, or the voice of galvanizing people towards a specific like purpose. I feel like that carried into the generation of, I would say like the Teapad Society that then later was created in like the 50s and 60s, where they were still doing the parties at people's houses. How would that translate to, I would say, now? Because I feel like if we understand history properly, most of the things that were successful as far as like the fights for the Black community were financed heavily by the art movement. There were a lot of artists that, through the finances of their art, they then, you know, patroned a lot of the mobilization. I feel like in today's society, a lot of Black artists, the idea of like galvanizing or being known as like a Black nationalist isn't necessarily seen in the same light, nor is it, I would say, encouraged, right? Like if you're an artist, you can't really make money and also use that money to then galvanize and mobilize. Studying people like Miss Savage, what would you say would be kind of like a recipe that you would give someone who's trying to rekindle that kind of conversation amongst New York artists? Like, use your artistry in order to mobilize, use your artistry to create finances to mobilize.
One of the ideas we really were trying to investigate was that success within the art world is considered commensurate with commercial success in some ways. And the extent to which Augusta Savage's success and visibility was impacted by the fact that she was so strongly seated in her blackness. So therefore, she was in a lot of high-profile art shows, and she got a lot of great reviews that really talked about her. That's why she was being called the sculptress of the black people. So she got very good reviews, but that somehow did not translate to necessarily curators including her in exhibits or art buyers buying her work. So one of the things that was, again, when people talk about what we couldn't get in the film, Augusta Savage basically, in terms of that concept of the rent party, she would tell anybody that they could get a sculpture made for $100 or $200. So she was basically not just representing everyday black life, she was in the street and interacting with people in that way and making art accessible. And so, for example, Tammi, you've told us stories about people who say that they've got sculptures that Augusta Savage did of their mama, and again, the baby being carved in the bar of soap. So she had, part of the reason why she was kind of not considered to be part of the talented 10th is that she, and coming from Florida, having the background she had, that she was very grassroots. She tried to make sure that art was not separated from the people, that the people had access to it, they saw themselves in the art, and they saw their way to be able to acquire the art. So unfortunately, we're living in a period where a lot of art just is not accessible because of the price tag. It was really interesting. Someone happened to be in my house and was looking at this artist I had, and they said, "Well, dag, I've only been able to get prints." So in some ways, we'd get the poster or whatever to be able to represent the art. So I think it's a really critical question. And it's a critical question for us as filmmakers, because what we're making as art as well is that how are we really going to be able to continue to survive in the marketplace relative to being able to fundraise for creative work as well as being able to be supported. So the question that Augusta Savage posed to Jacob Lawrence when she started crying, I feel that's still the question on the table. I don't know if other people have other views about that, but in terms of where is the patronage, where is the viability, where is the sustainability? Charlotte and I have been making movies 30, 40 years, but every time we go to ask for money, it's like we basically get treated like we're just new on the block. So it's a very serious question. And if there are other artists in the room, I think it merits its own discussion. And so thank you for bringing that issue forward.
So we have time for a last question, a short question and a short response. But I just wanted to say it's also to remember that there are many kinds of artists out there, and sometimes we're always looking at the ones that, let's say, the mainstream have propped up as the black artist or the fill in the blank, and instead we're missing the other kinds of artists that we see in our community every day who are making quality art, who are investing in various activist movements via that art. And that's not to say that the mainstream, the black artist isn't doing it, but it is to say cast our sights a little broader so that when we're talking about artists, that we're giving all kinds of artists, the ones who are on the fringes as well, those kinds of opportunities to be patronized.
You said so much, I almost lost my question.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. Quickly, just because you talked about the economic side of art, it was very telling to me that the painting at the Metropolitan of Juan de Pareja was purchased by the museum for, I think, $5.5 million. I think it was 1970 or 1980. The current value, when I did the calculation, is almost $40 million today. But I think the problem is most of us don't have the education as to what the actual value of Black art could be. So I think you're right, that'll be a separate discussion. My question about Augusta Savage is, I know that she was not able to go to the school in Paris because she was Black, but she went after. Do you know anything about where she studied when she went to Paris finally?
Yeah, she went to, it's in the film, l'Académie, I can't,
I happen to be French.
Right, yeah,
L'Académie
good.
de la
Someone-
Grande Chaumière.
yeah, that one. She did, and she was able to stay for 2 years.
3 years
Right, 3 years. She got additional money,
from Carnegie and from Rosenbaum.
and she went to other parts in Paris. I mean, in
Yeah,
Europe.
she went to
yeah.
Italy and she did,
Germany,
and Germany. She did get a chance to travel. So, and again, that's a situation where while she was in Paris, she was able to use some of her fellowship money to have some of her art bronzed, but she was not able to ship it back when she came back in 1933.
I want to thank our panelists for being so engaging, and thank you all for being an engaged audience.
Trying to get my glasses.
We are now going to have our open archive, which will take place in the American Negro Theater. We're going to take you all in small groups so that each group can have an opportunity to take a look and ask questions of the curator and archivist working in that division. In the meanwhile, I want to let you all know that we also have a pop-up exhibition, a pop-up display in the Langston Hughes lobby. So take some time, look at the pop-up, look at the exhibition, and we'll get you all in groups. So if you start a line at the top of the stairs that go down, we will take you all in group. I want to say thank you again. Stop by the Schomburg shop. There might be some material in there that you want, and certainly stop back by the Schomburg Center to explore the archives. Have a good afternoon.